Hello, hi children. My name is Paul Raj Kandukuri, your teacher of English. I'm working as a lecturer, APSP Quarters Government Girls Junior College, Kakinada. My dear children, we are going to enjoy a beautiful poem. This poem narrates the legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. Come on children, let's have a look on the overview of this module 3, A Legend of the Northland. My dear students, now we are going to see the overview of our module 3, A Legend of the Northland. This overview consists of speaking, under this expressions and the storytelling. Second one is writing, under this rewriting and description. The third one is A Legend of Northland poem. Under this, poem recitation and the appreciation of the poem. My dear students, now we are going to have learning objectives. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to recite the poem A Legend of the Northland with proper intonation and pronunciation. Justifies the statement, the woman was selfish, with evidence from the poem. Judge the actions of Saint Peter in the poem and explain whether they were justified or not. Predict the consequences of the woman's selfishness in the story and how it affected her life. Students, according to the overview, we are now entering into the speaking part. Using some of the expressions, talk about an incident when you were very scared. You may have a competition to decide whose story was the most frightening. Here we go with the answer. I was too afraid on that day, as I had never seen such things in my life. The object that chased me was covered with a long white piece of cloth. I can still remember that the object appeared to me suddenly, and since I was a little kid, I could not do anything. I just shouted loud to help me. My dear students, let's enter into the next part, writing. Try to rewrite the story without its humor, merely as a frightening incident. What details or parts of the story would you leave out? Answer is like this. To turn the story into just a frightening incident without humor, I would leave out the following elements from the story. The first one is the author's description about his beauty and his admiration of the same. The second one is his ambition to marry a fat and rich female doctor. Third one, the part about the snake admiring its beauty by looking into the mirror. In the part of writing, the second one is read the description given alongside this sketch from a photograph in a newspaper, Times of India, 4th September 1999. Make up a story about what the monkey is thinking or why it is looking into the mirror. Write a paragraph about it. The answer is like this, my dear students. The monkey prints itself using a piece of mirror in the Delhi Ridge. It is the first time that the monkey is seeing a reflection of it so clear and lifelike. The monkey admires the beautiful brown hair on its head, neatly parted along the center. Its eyes are a twinkling brown. It has a flat nose and a small mouth. The monkey then opens its mouth to inspect its tiny set of teeth with two large fangs. It sticks its black tongue out at the reflection. As the piece of mirror is moved slightly, it sees its shoulders and body in the mirror. It then flicks its long brown tail and brings it into the reflection. But the features on its face are more interesting. It manages to get its face back on the mirror and once again goes back to inspect its mouth. Yes, my dear children, it's a beautiful poem, A Legend of the Northland. Every poem is written by some wonderful poet. Here, the poet of this poem is Phoebe Cary. Let's know about this poet. Phoebe Cary, born on September 4th, 1824 in the US state of Ohio. Cary and her sister were raised in a farm and received little schooling. Nonetheless, the lack of formal education was partly compensated through the homeschooling they received. Alice was taught by their mother and Phoebe was taught by Alice. And as they learned to read and write, they developed an interest in literature. Phoebe Cary was an American poet and the younger sister of her fellow poet Alice Cary. The sisters were often understood together and were popularly known as the Cary sisters. The sisters began their career by collaborating on a collection of poems and later went on to produce separate volumes. However, joint anthologies of the sisters' unpublished poems were published after their deaths in 1871. Phoebe Cary began to write when she was 13 years old. She began writing under the guidance of Alice, and her first poem was published in a Boston newspaper around the same time as her sister. My dear students, now I am going to recite the poem. My dear students, I am going to give some gaps and pauses for you so that you may repeat after me, each and every line by line. Okay, children? Repeat after me, line by line. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like Bear's Club in their funny furry clothes. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it is true. And yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Once when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, you know. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burned black as a coal in the flame. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. My dear children, let's have a look on glossary. Glossary here is the right meanings of the new words as far as this poem is concerned. First one, legend, old traditional story. Saint Peter, an apostle of Christ, provoke, make angry. My dear students, some interesting topics and interesting things are there in this poem, A Legend of the Northland. My dear children, this poem is a ballad poem. You know what is ballad poem? I'll explain you. A Legend of the Northland is a ballad poem, means it narrates a story in short paragraphs. And also in a ballad, all the paragraphs contain 4 lines, and in total it has 16 stanzas that tell us a story. They are part of the folk culture that orally passed from one generation to the next. Parts of speech of a legend of a Northland by Phoebe Cary uses simile, alliteration, apostrophe, dialogue, repetition, punning, polysyndeton, and imagery. Let's look at the words at the end of the second and fourth lines. Wise, snows and clothes, true and you, below and no. We find that snows rhymes with clothes, true rhymes with you, and below rhymes with no. Find more such rhyming words, my dear children, in the next lines of the poem. The story is about Saint Peter. Which poetic device is used in the last line, a legend of Northland? That is alliteration. It is the repetition of a letter at the start of closing placed words. For example, the repetition of the letter T in they, tell, them. What is the message of A Legend of the Northland? Teaches us a strong moral principle that we should never be selfish and think of others too. The poem teaches us to be generous and to help the needy if we are capable of doing so. How does the poet describe the Northland? The Northland is far away in the north. In this land of snow and ice, the days are very short. The nights are too long. When it snows, the harness swift reindeer to the sledges. What figure of speech is a poem? Poets use figures of speech in their poems. Several types of figures of speech exist for them to choose from. 5 common ones are simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbola, and understatement. What is the repetition in the legend of Northland? There are 2 different kinds of repetitions used in the poem: epizexis and diacope. The repetition of the word away in the line away, away in the Northland is an example of epizexis, as the word is repeated immediately without any word in between. What imagery is used in the poem A Legend of Northland? Imagery used in the poem A Legend of Northland is: and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. A little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. She took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat. Is A Legend of the Northland based on a true story? No, this is not a true story. It is a legend. I think the most important part of this poem is the one in which Saint Peter turns the old lady into a woodpecker to teach her a lesson. Which part of this poem is the most important? No, this is not a true story. This is a story narrated by people in the Northland, but one can learn a lesson from it. The part of the poem where Saint Peter curses the old lady for being selfish is the most important part of the story. What is a simile in poem? Simile is common poetic device. The subject of the poem is described by comparing it to another object or subject using as or like. For example, the subject may be creeping as quietly as a mouse or be slay like a fox. I am going to give you the summary of this poem, A Legend of the Northland, by the end of this lesson. Now, student is able to recite the poem A Legend of the Northland with proper intonation and pronunciation. Justify the statement, the woman was selfish, with evidence from the poem. Judge the actions of Saint Peter in the poem and explain whether they were justified or not. Predict the consequences of the woman's selfishness in the story, how it affected her life. Now children, I am going to give you the ethical caption of this A Legend of the Northland. The message of this poem is we should never be selfish and think of others too. That's all for now, my dear children.